Chapter 1: The Temple Beyond the Pines. In the heart of the mountains, where mists curled through pine branches like whispered secrets, there lay a quiet village named Hinokami. The roofs of the wooden houses bowed gently under moss and thyme, and the air always carried the scent of cedar and earth, as if the forest never stopped breathing. Children ran barefoot through narrow paths lined with wildflowers, their laughter echoing like wind chimes on summer evenings. Life in Hinokami flowed like the river that wound around it, slow, rhythmic, and full of memory. The village was built in a crescent shape around an ancient temple that had stood for over 1,000 years. It was said to house an old spirit, though no one could agree on what sort. Some elders claimed it was a fox spirit who guided lost travelers. Others spoke in hushed tones of a dragon that slept beneath the altar stones. The only thing everyone agreed on was that strange things happened near the temple. Nothing frightening, just odd. Birds that sang in forgotten tongues, lamps that lit themselves, a breeze that smelled faintly of sugar plums, even in winter. 12-year-old Sora had lived in Hinokami his entire life, with wide, curious eyes and hair that stuck up at odd angles no matter how hard he tried to tame it. He was the kind of boy who asked too many questions and climbed too many trees. He carried a leather-bound notebook with him everywhere, where he scribbled down everything he noticed: the way the shadow of the temple gate moved at noon, the sound the bell made on rainy days, the peculiar dreams he had after visiting the shrine. Sora's closest friend was a girl named Hina. She was quiet, the sort who observed more than she spoke, and always wore a scarf, no matter the season. Her family ran the old tea house near the river where she helped serve dango and roasted barley tea. Hina had a gift for hearing things others missed: the sigh of the earth before a storm, the hush of the river when it turned a secret bend. Sora often said she could hear the heartbeats of ghosts. Then there was Kenji, older than the others by a year, and always scowling, as if daring the world to surprise him. He had a wooden pendant he never took off and refused to say where it came from. Though he pretended not to care, he always walked Sora and Hina home after dark, making excuses. Everyone in Hinokami had heard stories of Yubaba, the witch who stole names and built palaces in the sky, who traded wishes for memories and brewed storms in teacups. But those were bedtime tales, the kind you half believed and half feared. "That can't be her," Kenji said. "She's not real." But even Kenji's voice trembled. Yubaba's eyes scanned the children. Then she smiled. "Well," she said, her voice both thunderous and delicate, "it seems the wind has brought me to the right place." She turned and began climbing the temple steps, her shadow twisting behind her like ink in water. That night, the sky over Hinokami turned violet. The river ran backward for an hour, and every mirror in the village cracked down the center. Sora didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of his room and listened to the strange wind that still moved through the pine trees. Something had shifted. Something old had awakened, and it had seen him. Chapter 2: The Whispers of the Bell. The morning after Yubaba's arrival, Hinokami felt different. The clouds above the mountain curled in strange spirals, as if stirred by a great spoon. The crows were quieter than usual, and the bell at the temple rang 3 times at dawn, though no one had touched its rope. Sora woke with a start, his heart hammering. The dream he had was already slipping away from him like steam in winter. He remembered a path of paper lanterns floating over water, a voice calling his name from a house that wasn't there. He sat up, blinking in the dim morning light. The air felt thicker, charged. He opened his notebook and drew the lanterns from memory. They glowed on the page as if lit from within. Across town, Hina stood by the riverbank, watching leaves drift in slow circles. The scarf around her neck fluttered gently. Her grandmother, who had once been the village's shrine keeper, always said that when the river stopped flowing, something old was remembering its name. That morning, the river had slowed to a near stillness. Kenji wasn't at the usual meeting spot behind the tea house. He had left early, before even the sun peeked over the hills, muttering something about checking the woods for foxes. But the truth was, Kenji couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Yubaba, not just from the night before, but from stories his grandfather used to tell him about a woman with owl eyes and smoke for hair, who once helped rebuild the temple after a fire in exchange for the villagers' most precious memories. People had willingly given them up, and afterward, they smiled too easily and forgot the names of their own children for a week. Kenji remembered because his grandfather had written it down, and Kenji had kept those notebooks hidden away under the floorboards of the storage shed. By mid-morning, the children had gathered again, as they always did, this time on the temple steps. They sat in a loose circle, surrounded by the whispering pine trees. Yubaba had not emerged all morning, but strange things had already begun to happen. The rice paddies shimmered like glass. The koi in the pond began swimming in perfect circles. A shrine fox had followed Hina from her house and now sat beside her like a loyal dog, blinking slowly. "Did anyone else see the sky last night?" Sora asked. "It turned violet. I thought I dreamed it," Hina replied. Kenji was staring at the bell tower. "That bell doesn't ring unless someone pulls it. You think she did it?" Kenji didn't answer. His eyes were focused, worried. Then, as if summoned by their thoughts, the temple doors creaked open, and Yubaba stepped out. She moved like smoke, graceful despite her hunched frame. Her robes rustled with the sound of feathers brushing stone. She smiled down at them, her teeth small and impossibly white. "Well," she said, "it's such a fine morning for a story." She motioned for them to follow, and against all better judgment, they did. Inside the temple, incense hung heavy in the air. The walls were lined with ancient scrolls and masks that watched them with empty eyes. At the center stood a great brazier, filled with blue flame that did not burn. "Sit," Yubaba instructed, gesturing to cushions placed around the fire. Sora sat first, then Hina, then reluctantly Kenji. Yubaba held out her hands. The fire responded, shifting to the shape of a bird in flight. "This village was built on old ground," she said, "on the bones of a story too old to be written down. Long ago, the spirit of memory lived here. It guarded time itself. But when people stopped believing, the spirit fell asleep beneath this very temple, forgotten. And without memory, the world becomes hollow." She turned to Sora. "Do you know what happens to forgotten things?" He shook his head. "They become stories, and stories, when left alone, become restless." The flame bird crumbled into ash. Yubaba stood. "I came because something has stirred the spirit. One of you may have awakened it, or perhaps all of you together." Kenji stood abruptly. "What do you mean? Awakened it how?" Yubaba's eyes twinkled. Do you not dream in languages you do not know? Do you not see shapes in the shadows? This is no accident. Hina's voice was soft. You said it guards time. Yes, Yubaba whispered, and something is trying to steal it. The fire puffed into smoke. A scroll unfurled behind her, showing a figure cloaked in darkness, holding a cracked mirror. The children looked at each other. Kenji frowned. So what are we supposed to do? Stop it? Yubaba smiled. You are not meant to do anything. You are simply the ones it noticed. With that, she turned and floated out of the hall, her laughter curling through the smoke. Over the next days, the world around Hinokami shifted further. People began forgetting little things: keys, recipes, the names of flowers. At first, no one noticed, but then Mrs. Yamaguchi forgot the name of her dead husband, and the old potter no longer recognized the shape of a tea bowl. And Sora began to forget what his father's voice sounded like. I'm writing everything down, he told Hina one afternoon, so I don't lose it, so it doesn't slip away. She nodded. Do you think it's the spirit she mentioned? That it's waking up? Hungry? Kenji stood watch at the temple every night, sharpening sticks into spears and whispering to the air. One evening, the shrine fox spoke. It was dusk. The children had lit paper lanterns and floated them on the river. As the lights drifted downstream, the fox stepped up beside Hina. You are the thread keeper, it said. They froze. What? The fox looked at Hina. You hear what others do not. You feel when time trembles. You must remember the names that others forget. And with that, it vanished. Hina stood silent for a long time. I've always heard things, she said. Even when I was little, I just thought it was my imagination. Sora reached for her hand. Maybe imagination is what the world uses to talk to us. They looked at the river. The lanterns had stopped moving. The water had frozen in place, and beneath it, they saw shapes, faces, hands pressed against the ice from below. Kenji pulled them back. We have to go, now. As they ran, the temple bell rang again, once, then twice. Then, for the first time in 100 years, 3 times more. Yubaba stood at the top of the hill, her silhouette framed by fireflies that hovered unnaturally still. She was smiling. And behind her, the mountain split with a sound like thunder. Something was coming through. Chapter 3, The Mask Beneath the Ashes. The sky had split, the mountain had spoken, and Hinokami held its breath. The sound rumbled through the valley like a giant drawing breath. Trees swayed, though there was no wind. The river, frozen still just moments before, cracked down the center with a crystalline groan. Sora, Hina, and Kenji stood beneath the temple steps, hearts racing, staring at the hill where Yubaba had stood. But she was gone now, vanished like fog under sunlight. All that remained was a trail of scorched pine needles and the lingering scent of incense and something older, charcoal and roses. The villagers gathered slowly, drawn by the sound. They whispered among themselves, some clutching children, others clutching old talismans passed down from forgotten ancestors. Ubahanan, the oldest woman in the village, murmured prayers under her breath, fingers shaking. From the mountain, a low hum began to echo. "What is it?" Sora whispered. "I don't know," Hina replied, "but I think it remembers us." They waited, but nothing came through the split in the mountain. Not yet. That night, as the village returned to uneasy silence, Kenji slipped away. He didn't tell the others, didn't leave a note. He just followed the old path, one few remembered. Behind the temple, past the stone torii gate hidden by creeping moss, and into the woods where the air felt too still. Kenji wasn't. He remembered walking these woods with someone long ago, a girl with hair like lantern light. He remembered a fire, a bargain, a name taken, and he remembered a mask. He reached beneath his shirt and pulled out the pendant he always wore. It wasn't just a pendant, it was a seal, a mask in miniature, wood etched with ancient runes. And as he looked into the mirror, the mask beneath the ashes began to wake. When Kenji returned to the village the next morning, his eyes had changed. There was something in them, something deeper, like looking into a well and seeing the stars reflected there. He didn't speak much, just sat beneath the temple's bell tower and watched the mountain. Sora noticed immediately. "What happened to you?" Kenji didn't answer. Instead, he handed Sora a scroll. "Where did you get this?" Sora asked, unrolling it. The symbols were the same ones Yubaba had conjured in the fire, only now they glowed faintly. "I remembered," Kenji said. "I used to be someone else, before the name I have now." Hina stared. "What are you talking about?" Kenji turned to her. "I was one of the mountain's guardians, a memory keeper, before Yubaba came the first time." Silence. "I don't know how," he continued, "but she took my name, my real one, locked it away. I've lived a whole other life since, but now it's coming back." Sora was the first to recover. "So she's been here before?" Kenji nodded. "And whatever's behind the mountain? She didn't come to protect us from it. She came to open the door." Hina gripped her scarf. "Then we need to close it." Kenji held up the pendant. "This is part of the key, but I'm not strong enough alone. I need your help." That night, the three children returned to the clearing behind the temple. The mirror pulsed. Kenji stepped forward and touched it. This time, it rippled. Hina followed, clutching a lantern that burned with silver light. Sora, with his notebook tucked under his arm, came last. They stepped through and entered the other field. It was a world of memory and shadow, where trees grew upside down and rivers sang lullabies. The sky was a tapestry of moving ink. Spirits flitted through the trees, some with wings of paper, others with eyes like drifting stars. A spirit with feathers for fingers bowed low. "You have returned, nameless one," it said to Kenji. Sora blinked. "They know you here." Kenji's voice was quiet. "I used to live here, before I forgot." The spirit led them to a temple of glass, growing like a flower from the hillside. Inside, a throne of stone waited. A girl sat upon it. She looked no older than Hina. Her eyes were moon pale. "You've come," she said, her voice echoing. "Who are you?" Sora asked. "I am the spirit of the lost name," she said, "and I am dying." Hina stepped forward. "Is it because of Yubaba?" The spirit nodded. "She has opened the gate." The things that dwell in forgotten places are seeping through. They feast on what is remembered. If you don't stop her, the veil will tear. Kenji knelt. What must we do? The spirit looked at him. You must reclaim your name, and you must remember what was traded to bind the mountain. Sora opened his notebook. We'll write it all down, the spirit smiled. Writing is the oldest magic, memory given shape. She raised her hand. From the floor, a path unfurled, stone steps leading back to the rift in the mountain. Go, she said, before the name thief forgets you completely. Back in Hinokami, the wind had stopped. The fireflies no longer moved, and Yubaba stood at the mountain's mouth, her robes spread wide, her eyes glowing with stolen light. She did not smile now. She waited, and the children were coming. Chapter 4. Where names are buried, the wind returned in the night, but it was not the same. It howled through the pine trees like a morning song, sharp and hollow. The village of Hinokami lay under a sky painted with bruised clouds and stars that pulsed like slow heartbeats. People began locking their doors earlier. Lanterns flickered even without wind, and the temple bell, long silent again, rang once at midnight. No one pulled the rope. Sora, Hina, and Kenji stood at the temple steps, staring up at the mountain. The crack along its face had widened. A dark mist now curled outward from it, creeping down like spilled ink. Yubaba was somewhere inside that mountain, twisting the veil between worlds. She's trying to erase something, Kenji said. Sora looked at him. Erase what? Us. This place. All of it. If she can unwrite what's been remembered, she can reshape it however she wants. Hina held her scarf tightly. But why? Kenji hesitated. I think she's afraid of forgetting, of being forgotten. The three of them began the ascent toward the mountain, where the earth grew blackened and dry, and the air thinned with each step. The forest on the mountain's back had begun to wither. Leaves turned to ash beneath their feet, and the stones whispered words in languages long Yubaba smiled. And yet, you already feel them slipping, don't you? Sora hesitated. The image of his father's face was blurry now, like a drawing left out in the rain. Hina whispered, We won't let you. Yubaba's laughter echoed like breaking glass. Then let us see what your names are worth. She raised her hand, and the world around them trembled. They found themselves in a memory maze. Each turn led into moments from their pasts, twisted and half true. Sora stood in his childhood home, where everything was slightly wrong. His mother's voice coming from the wrong room, the walls too tall, the smell of rain without rain. He heard her call his name. He almost answered, but he remembered. He opened his notebook and began writing, anchoring himself to the truth he knew. The temple gate at dawn, Hina's scarf in spring, Kenji's scowl when pretending not to care. The maze shuddered. Hina walked through a field of paper cranes. Each bird held a whisper. Every forgotten voice she'd ever heard. She bent to pick one up. It cut her finger. She bled memory. She nearly collapsed under the sound of all the names she could never say. Then she reached for her scarf and remembered who gave it to her. Oba-chan's hands, warm and trembling. Her whisper, to keep your voice warm. The cranes folded themselves back into silence. Kenji wandered into a memory of fire. The night Yubaba came the first time, the night his name was taken. He watched as the boy he had been made the deal, watched as the spirit sealed it in a wooden pendant. He shouted at himself not to do it, but the boy couldn't hear him, so he stepped forward and took the name back himself. The pendant cracked open. Inside was a slip of paper, so old it nearly fell apart. His name, Kaito. They returned to the temple in the mirrored Hinokami, stronger. Sora held his notebook like a sword. Hina walked barefoot, each step leaving light and Kenji. Kaito stood taller than before, the name echoing through him like music. Yubaba looked at them and hissed, "You don't know what you're doing. Names are a weight. You'll drown in them." Sora stepped forward, "Then let it be heavy." They raised their hands together. Light poured from them, not the light of battle, but of memory, the scent of the tea house, the sound of pine trees in wind, the laughter of children in summer. It engulfed Yubaba. She screamed, not in pain, but in loss. Her form shimmered, then began to dissolve, and for a moment she was small, a girl, alone, forgotten. Sora looked at her. "What's your name?" She looked up, her eyes full of tears. "I don't remember," and then she was gone. The temple collapsed behind them, the veil sealed, the sky cleared. Hinokami breathed again. People began to remember. The river flowed. The crows returned. The bell rang one final time, gently. At the temple, the children sat in silence. Kaito looked to the mountain. She wasn't evil, just lost. Hina nodded. "We all are, sometimes." Sora opened his notebook. "Then we write it down so we remember." And as the sun rose over the village, golden and bright, the pages of his book fluttered in the breeze, filled with names, with drawings, with truths no longer buried. For now, they were safe. But the memory of Yubaba's sorrow lingered. A reminder that forgetting is not peace, and remembering, though painful, is the magic that keeps the world whole. Chapter 5. The Village That Remembers. Morning came gently to Hinokami. The mist no longer clung to the trees with restless fingers, but drifted softly across the fields, wrapping the village in a silvery calm. Dew sparkled on the rice stalks. The river hummed its old song again, its voice no longer fractured. Birds, real birds, sang from the branches, and their melodies rang like familiar lullabies. It was the first peaceful sunrise in many days. Sora stood on the hill outside the village with his notebook open in his lap. His pencil moved slowly, no longer frantic, as he traced the outlines of the trees, the temple gate, and the small fox shrine, where the wind now played gently. He drew the bell tower, now whole again, and he smiled. Behind him, Hina walked barefoot across the grass, carrying a small wooden box. Her scarf fluttered behind her, though the wind was barely a breeze. Inside the box were folded cranes, each one inscribed with a name, the names of those who had once been forgotten. Together, they had spent the past few days helping people remember. Some memories returned like rain on dry soil, slow and hesitant. Others came in a flood, leaving behind tears and laughter. The potter remembered the shape of a teacup. Mrs. Yamaguchi remembered her husband's name and wept as she whispered it to the wind. Even Oban began to speak more clearly again, telling stories from her childhood as if they'd only happened yesterday. Kaito, no longer just Kenji, joined them on the hill, hands in his pockets. He still wore the pendant, though it now glowed softly with a light only they could see. "How's the drawing?" he asked, peering over Sora's shoulder. "Almost finished," Sora said. Hina placed the box of cranes down between them. "I thought we could release them tonight, on the river, a memory lantern for each name." Kaito nodded. "Let's send them home." Later that day, the villagers gathered by the riverbank. Someone brought a shamisen. Children ran barefoot. The tea house brewed endless pots of roasted barley tea. Old women strung up lanterns between trees, their laughter mingling with the scent of mochi and pine. It felt like a festival, though no one called it that. It was a quiet celebration, a remembering. Sora stood beside Hina and Kaito on the river's edge as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in golden amber. Hina opened the wooden box. One by one, they handed out the paper cranes. Each crane was gently placed on a small wooden raft, along with a candle and a flower. The villagers lit them as the stars appeared, and together they placed the rafts onto the water. The river lit up with soft, flickering light, and for the first time in living memory, it flowed not just with water, but with names. As the cranes floated away, the shrine fox appeared on the opposite bank. It bowed once and disappeared into the shadows. Oba-anan, standing at the center of the crowd, raised her hand and began to sing. It was an old lullaby, a song that no one remembered teaching her, but everyone somehow knew. Voices joined hers, one by one, and as the song carried over the water, Sora closed his eyes. He saw Yubaba not as the name thief, not as the witch, but as the girl she had been, alone in the place between stories, clutching a name she no longer remembered. He opened his notebook and wrote one last line: "To remember is to love, even the forgotten." In the days that followed, Hinokami changed, not in any grand magical way. The temple still creaked in the wind, the pines still whispered, but people began planting flowers again. Children laughed louder. The tea house stayed open later. The villagers honored the names they'd nearly lost, writing them on stones and placing them in the shrine garden. The mirror in the woods disappeared one morning, leaving behind a ring of moss and one folded crane resting on a rock. The veil had sealed. The other field was quiet, and yet something lingered, a warmth, the kind you feel when you hold hands on a cold day, the kind that stays with you long after the fire has gone out. Kaito found peace in his own name. He carved it onto a piece of cedar and hung it in the bell tower. Hina took up her grandmother's role, weaving stories and prayers into the wind. People came to her for blessings, for guidance, for comfort. She never turned them away. And Sora kept drawing, kept writing. He filled his notebook with moments, big and small, the way light hit the river at dusk, the sound of laughter on the temple steps, the quiet grief of a lost name gently remembered. Years would pass, children would grow, but in Hinokami the story remained, tucked into the roots of the temple, whispered by the pine trees, and floating forever downstream on a river that remembered. On the night of the full moon, many seasons later, Sora, older now, with lines at the corners of his eyes, sat once more on the hill. a child sat beside him, wide-eyed and curious. "Tell me again," the child said, "about the woman with the owl eyes and the boy who forgot his name." Sora smiled and opened a new notebook. "All right," he said, "but this time you write it with me." He handed the child a pencil, and together they began, because stories, like names, are meant to be shared, and because memory, when held gently, becomes a light that never goes out. The end.